My name is Trace Fulbright, and I'm going to be giving you guys the plant lovers tour on late bloomers in the garden today. And so, I guess, are we ready to begin? All right. So, we're going to start with a Viburnum. Okay, so this is a Viburnum tinus compacta, which is supposed to be a more compact hybrid. Although looking at it, this is not. By some definitions, this may not be super compact, but it is. It isn't coming into bloom now, and this is a very good time for a late bloomer's tour. You see, it's got these blue berries on it, which are a focal point of interest after the flowers. However, unlike some viburnums, these berries are not edible at all. They will cause stomach upset, nausea, bad things. But the buds, if you notice, are like a pink color, and then they open into these white flowers, which are non-fragrant, or they're not fragrant to me. I'm not going to say I have the strongest sense of smell, but some viburnums have a pleasant aroma, and this is not one of them. Yeah, it's got a nice texture. It's probably the largest shrub I think that we're going to be covering today in terms of, well, the texture for what it is. Yes, this is the only thing that's going to have this texture with the white flowers on this late bloomers tour today. Yeah, it's deer resistant. Well, we don't have a lot of deer pressure here in the garden, but that is something that I found was listed. And viburnums generally are a temperate genus. I'm sure there are some tropical counterparts to that, but they're native. This is native to southern Europe and northern Africa. So here we are growing it, and it's flowering now. Actually, viburnums, many species of them will start flowering now, and then there's several species that'll flower, even further into winter and then into the spring. And I think that this is the earliest viburnum that we have right now that's coming into flower.
So is this a full grown?
Yeah. Well, the thing they say about and the question was is this the fully grown size? Well, the thing they say about any kind of dwarf plant is plants never stop growing. It's just that dwarf plants grow slower. And so, like I said, this is supposed to be a compact cultivar. And by my definition, I don't know if I would say that it is compact, but it certainly it could be larger, I suppose. But yeah, I would say that it will continue to grow as plants do, but hopefully at a reduced rate. Honestly, in my personal experience, I can't remember how large this was like last year, but you can see the new growth. I mean, it's putting on maybe 3 inches on each branch. That's moderately slow. So, yeah. Okay. Yeah, and so that actually adds to the texture of this. So, like I was saying, the other things that we're going to be covering, none of them are really this fine textured with the foliage and the flowers. And so, if you want a shrub that's going to be flowering in the winter or late fall, and it's with a fine foliage, like to use as a hedge, this is probably a good choice. Oh yeah. So this is going to respond very well to pruning. A viburnum is they're very resilient. I mean, you could probably cut this to the ground and it would resprout. So. Okay, and so our next plant is a member of the marigold genus, Tagetes. This is Tagetes lucida, and you looking at it, you can probably tell, maybe not, but it is a member of the Asteraceae family. And actually, I encourage you guys, anybody that's here, you can rub this. The foliage kind of smells like licorice, and it's got many of the same chemical constituents as marigold. We plant marigold as some people plant it as like an insect repellent among their vegetable gardens. But I know it's also used as a substitute for tarragon in culinary uses. So yeah, I like its fine foliage, and it's done pretty well. We've had some pretty chilly nights, and it's maintained its color. And this one is from Mexico and Central America. So it's always surprising to see how cold hardy many of the plants from the Southwest are. Yeah, and that I don't really have a whole lot more than that to say about this, because its main properties is that it's going to be a small, fine textured perennial with these yellow flowers, and it has them in profusion. And I believe it started. I remember seeing it in flower probably about 2 weeks ago, and here it still is flowering. So, does anybody have any questions about this? Well, so it appears that they're now kind of beginning to senesce to a degree. So, I'd say maybe about 4 weeks. Okay. Well, 6 to 8 weeks. Sorry guys on my misappropriation of time, but it actually, as you can see, it actually forms a nice clump when given space. But this is something that is going to prefer full sun. The more sun you give it, the more prolifically it's going to bloom. So I would assume so, but I have not personally seen. I can't give you any examples of what pollinators would be visiting it, but Asteraceae generally is favored by many pollinators. You know,
We've seen a lot of little bees on Mars.
yeah, like native bees. Yeah, like solitary bees. Yeah, so if you are planting for pollinators, then this might be a worthy consideration. Okay, so this is Camellia xvernalis. Hiryu. It is, you know, as you know, camellias are not particularly cold hardy, so you know this is about as hardy as it gets. I think this is purported to be its full size. The reason that I included this camellia is, you know, there's plenty of camellias that have maybe a more spectacular, in your opinion, flower, but these are fragrant. And on a warm day, this is it has flowers in such a profusion that it actually diffuses through the air, and you can smell it from a ways away. And so, you know, for camellias, it's a bit unusual to associate them with a very strong fragrance. Yeah, so with that.
Can you smell it now?
So you can, yeah, if you get up closer to the flowers, you can smell them. But like I said, you know, generally with any kind of plant aromatic compounds, the heat is what kind of makes them diffuse. And so on a cooler, cloudy day, it's not really going to be permeating through the air like that. But you can still get up close and smell it. So the question was, is it this the typical Sasanqua kind of musky smell? And I would say no, because this is, to me, it's a bit different from any kind of camellia I've smelled. It's entirely pleasant, and I don't think I would associate it with a musky kind of smell. I've heard some people describe Sasanquas as having like a kind of a clovey smell in some ways, and I don't really think that this has that either. So I encourage everyone here, you know, take a whiff and, you know, make your own opinion of how it smells. But I think it smells quite nice, and the main reason I included it was because of that fragrance, because on a large size camellia like this, the fragrance actually becomes quite an asset in a landscape. So I actually, Bobby Green, one of a very, I guess I should repeat this question, you know, there is certainly a northern limit for camellias, and the question was, is there a southern limit for camellias? And now I cannot attest to, like, you know, the bottom half of Florida, but Bobby Green, a very renowned camellia breeder, is in Alabama and near the southern coast of Alabama. So I would say probably not. Probably not. Now, they may require a certain number of chill hours to flower, so maybe, you know, down in Miami they may not do so well, but certainly down to Alabama. So camellias, sometimes they'll get they can have aphids that cause they drop the sugary substance, and then you get like sooty mildew on them. I've seen that happen, but here I've not seen that on that camellia. So okay, so our next plant is a member of it's Ericaceae. This is Erica darleyensis Furzey. That's the cultivar name, and it's a heath. So, you know, it's a widespread family. A lot of them are in Europe, and you know, if you know anything about European climates, they don't have as much heat and also not as much humidity a lot of times, and certainly not the combination of the two. And so this is actually a hybrid between a species from Ireland and a species from Central Europe. And so neither one of those would likely grow here, and this is one that has surprisingly done well for us. And you know, actually, from what Tim was saying, this is actually growing more sparse over time, but it is still flowering, and these flowers are actually quite nice. And the flowers actually kind of, the color of them changes as they age. So I believe they start out more intense and then they fade to a white. But this is a very fine textured little, I guess I'd call it a little shrub. There's whole heathlands in Europe, and you know, they can grow on a wide variety of soils in terms of like moisture level. Some of them can grow in bogs, and some of them grow on more dry, like alpine sites. But they are all essentially bound to acidic soil. Many members of the Ericaceae family are by requisite need acidic soil, and this is no exception to that. So if if you have basic soil, you would probably need to amend it to be able to have any chance of growing these.
An older plant or?
Yeah. So these are older stems of it, and it's it's kind of spread over there that way a little bit. But this is all the same plant.
All right.
Yeah. So you could probably layer this, and I also believe that you can do cuttings of this. I do believe you can do cuttings of this. As with any plant, you can propagate it through seed, but these seeds are going to be very small. So I would definitely recommend either layering or stem cuttings. This is the only 2 flowers.
You gonna talk about that one then?
Yeah. I mean, I can talk. This is all the same plant. But I figure if you guys want to get the actual flower, there's one that has flowers on it right there. It's a little bit past peak for these, but they start in about October here, sometime in October, and it varies, depending on year to year. Okay, so this is Farfugium japonica Aureomaculatum, and it's kind of got a very interesting variegation on the leaves. So some people think it looks sick or like viral, but no, that is actually healthy and how it is supposed to grow. So there's a wide variety of forms available of this plant. There's double flowered forms. There's other variegations that do not look viral, like a typical medial variegation or around the edges. And also, there's a giant form of Farfugium as well, giganteum, and it has much larger leaves and grows to a more substantial height. These also spread by stolon and rhizome, so that's why you can see that they have spread along this. Stolons are essentially underground stems that spread and grow from the nodes. So.
Yellow flower.
Yeah, so these are Asteraceae, so yes, they are related, but I'm not sure about how close they fall in the phylogeny.
Well, that's the older, or is that?
Well, so it's going to vary. So actually, you can look over there and you can see one that doesn't have any variegation, and variegation is inherently a mutation, and so sometimes you can have that mutation revert back. And so then you'll just have a plain green leaf. But on ones where you see it's throwing both, that is likely either it could be a mutation at a node, but it's more than likely, because you can see even on these very tiny leaves, it's still got that same pattern. So if it doesn't have it by this size, it's probably not going to. Okay, so this is Fatsia polycarpa, and I'm sure some of you may be familiar with Fatsia japonica. Well, this is a more tropical species. It's not quite as cold hardy, but it is much more vigorous, and as you might be able to tell, and it grows to a larger size. If we have a very harsh winter, this will take some damage and kind of die back, which may be a good thing depending upon where you plant it in your landscape. But one thing that is very of interest in this plant is its panicles, as compared to Fatsia japonica, are covered with an endomentum, a brown fuzzy endomentum. I don't really know how easy it is for people to see that, and also its flower structure is just a tiny bit different on these inflorescences. The stigmas are purple, so whenever it is fully open, it'll have a bit more contrast than a Fatsia japonica. Now, it also got a kind of deeper sinuses. These lobes are a bit more pronounced than a lot of Fatsia japonica cultivars, and so it is of interest for that tropical look, because we are in a temperate landscape, and so we like to cultivate things that have tropical looks. Yeah. So does anybody have any questions about this one? And I don't know if anybody here is from the western part of the state, but we have members of this family that are native, like Aurelia spinosa, spikenard. Weird common name, but yes, this is in the same family. Also, the same family as English ivy. Yeah, Aureliaceae. So, yeah, you would not expect that. And actually, with the Fatsia, tying this into another Fatsia, this is if any of you are familiar with Fats hetera, that is a hybrid between English ivy and Fatsia japonica. Yeah. So the question is, how much shade can this handle? And the answer is a lot. But now, in order for it to flower, it's going to require some sun. It's going to require a fair bit of sun. Most Fatsias, I don't think any Fatsias really like full sun. They all prefer at least partial shade. But as with many shade growing plants, they do require a bit of sun in order for them to flower. And you know, that's a kind of I think a big point of interest for the Fatsia polycarpa, because like I said, these inflorescences are covered in a very fuzzy brown indumentum, which is just really cool. It's really cool. And whenever these are, before they're expanded as well, they're covered, and so it'll have these rather large brown fuzzy nodes. Yeah, it is quite substantial. We haven't had a harsh enough winter to knock it back last couple years. So.
What about deer?
So the question about deer, I have never heard of anybody having any problems with deer eating Fatsias. But now also, you know, that is from what my experience is, but here at the Arboretum we don't have a whole lot of deer pressure, so we're typically not going to see deer browsing things anyways. It's mainly rabbits. Mainly rabbits. Yeah, well, that's a japonica. That's a Fatsia japonica. And that's probably spider's web is the one you're thinking about, or variegata. Variegata is a more solid variegation, while spider's web is a speckled kind of.
And the solid one that was different colors of green. So does that need any sun to keep the variegation?
No, no. Now it may be a bit more intense and with more light, but it's that variegation does not depend on the sun. So this is the next plant we're going to be covering, a Mahonia illicina. Yeah, so everybody make sure you can see these blooms. That is the main point of interest on this. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with Mahonias as a genus, which is, you know, now being taxonomically divvied out in Berberis. But this is probably my favorite Mahonia, and due to the fact that these flowers they have like a bubbly appearance on these inflorescences. There's like little bubbles before they open, and you see how large and spread out the inflorescence is as compared to many Mahonia species. And this is quite of interest. This is actually listed as hardy to zone 9, but we've never had it take significant damage here. So this is from like northwestern Mexico, northeastern Mexico, yes. But like most Mahonias, do not plant it full sun, you know, for ideally. You can, but they're typically a bit less happy than if you give them some shade. You give them some reprieve from the sun. Now, also like most Mahonias, the berries are edible, but very bitter when raw, so you can make like jelly or something out of them if you so desire. You know, they will ripen to blue purplish berries that hang on these same inflorescences. And yeah, this is, I guess also to note is that, you know, some Mahonias can be a tiny bit unfriendly. This is not one of them. It's pretty mild. So actually, I don't know if you want to get a better shot of that foliage. Does anybody have any questions about this Mahonia?
Prunus?
Yeah, you can prune Mahonias. They're pretty tolerant. You can also propagate it too by taking cuttings, like taking cuttings of these shoots like that, these terminal growths, and sticking those into media, and they will root like many other hardwood cuttings. Well, it's more like a softwood cutting how they root, but they will root. You can propagate them like that. But yeah, they're pretty tolerant to pruning. But now, this is not something that I would cut to the ground. This is not a plant that you would cut to the ground. So the question was, you know, is this bending habit the way it's going to grow? Well, so that's primarily a function of weight on these long stems, and, you know, it reaching for light. You can see back here on the other part of the plant that it's growing more upright, you know, and so like many plants, if you get top heavy, they'll start to lean, and then once it gets lignified, it's going to keep that form. So I would say that, you know, it can grow like that, but I don't think that should be assumed to be its default habit. You know, I think that's going to be affected by where you plant it and its light conditions. Well, pretty much all Mahonias bloom from terminal growths. You know, some plants like redbuds will bloom actually on the main trunk of the tree, and that's blooming on old growth. These are all blooming on new growth. All of these terminal apexes were grown this year. Now, obviously, you can see the nodes of where previous year's growth was, but it does not flower there. It only flowers from the terminal apexes.
So that may be on the top of that one there.
Yeah. So here, let me.
Okay,
let me get back here. So, okay. So these flowers are on another terminal apex that is further back. It is not blooming on old growth. And yes, these are young flower buds, which do not really appear to have taken any damage, even though we've been kind of cold. And you can also see the new growth has a little bit of a different pigment to it. So that's actually pretty soft. Okay, so now our next plant is Prunus incisa, and this is a flowering cherry. This is like the earliest flowering cherry that we have. Well, I hesitate to say that because you can always find sporadic blooms on members of the cherry family, but this is probably the only one that's really in peak bloom right now. We have another one of these planted down in the Xeric garden, Xeric area, southwest. And this is hardy to zone 5, so it's quite hardy. And as you can see, I mean, it's very prolifically in its flowering, very profuse flowers. They kind of have they got a pink eye and then white petals. So you kind of have that two colors on the same flower, and it gives it a little bit of contrast. And as you can see, it's got some actual new growth coming out on some places of it, as well as some old foliage remaining. So, you know, new cherries, they try to iron that out, so it's, you know, you don't just confuse the flowers with the emergence of the leaves. You get more clear pictures of the flowers that way. But yeah, so this is a flowering cherry, and this has got a really nice habit as well. It's pretty compact, like a very small kind of dwarf cherry tree that really packs a lot of bang for the buck in terms of its flowering. You know, it's early December and you see it. So, well, from looking at the leaves that I see right now, the fall color is probably not something that you're going to write home about. It is the season of interest. I mean, it's going to have nice foliage in the early summer, and some cherries have issues with foliar diseases later in the summer. I'm not sure if this is one of them. I don't really think it is, seeing as it's a straight species incisa. But it's so this bloom, it will continue to bloom like this. Kind of, you can still see it's got buds that are ready to open and buds that are fully open. It'll bloom like this I'd say probably at least another 2 to 3 weeks. But now, if we get like a super hard freeze, you would see damage to these flowers. And so, just kind of like flowering apricots, you know, they come out at a time whenever they can really get nuked by cold weather. So I'd say the flowering period a lot of times in the winter is going to be determined by the weather. But yeah, I'd say probably 2 to 3 weeks, and it may stretch on sporadically past that. But you're going to have I'd say probably about a 2-week window of really peak bloom. You know, where it's really covered in these flowers. So, does anybody have any questions about this one? Does it bear fruit? So no. This is, well, I mean, it does bear fruit, probably little tiny cherries, but they're not cherries that you're going to want to eat. You know, that's a whole different species of cherry hybrids that actually do that. And yeah, so the birds will love it. Probably spread it around, but it's not really, the cherries are not going to be of interest to you. They're not really that particularly ornamental. I mean, they're tiny. So, and also by the time that they're ripe, the tree is covered in its leaves. They're kind of obscured to a degree. So, yeah. And also, as a cool note, you can see over here that's tetrapanax. That's what that is. That's related to the Fatsias that we saw earlier. But, you know, it's not one we're going to talk about simply because its flowers can get zapped by the cold. You can actually see one over there where the flowers are all bent down from the frost. You know, cold. That one couldn't take it. But yeah, that is related to Fatsia. So it's in the same family as English ivy. But the plant we're going to be talking about right now is Galanthus. Specifically, Galanthus elwesii var monasticus. And it's got these white flowers. I mean, I hope everybody can see these, and they grow as a bulb, and they spread as such. They actually spread kind of quite well. They spread quite well. So you end up with these profusions of white flowers right around now. I mean, it's a late flowering bulb, and you know, in the white garden, it's quite fitting. I really like how it's they're pendulous flowers that kind of hang, and it's really kind of a little unique flower. Most bulbs that we cultivate, you know, the flowers kind of either look up at you or they have other colors in them. And this is just a white pendulous flower, and it does them in profusion. And actually, you can propagate this from seed. Now, as you know, growing any kind of bulb from seed is going to take several years for it to flower. Several years. But you can also propagate this by division. The bulbs are quite small, kind of reminiscent of like a yard onion, I guess you would say, like a common onion. So, yeah, no, it's native to southern Turkey, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, native to southern Turkey. So I don't know. There's other species of Galanthus as well, and they kind of differ in their the foliage size and to a degree the flower size, but primarily the foliage. You can still see more of them pushing up. That's what actually what all those clumps with the white. You can even see the white buds on the tips on some of those. That's going to be the flowers. You can see it's quite prolific through here, and that's all through spreading through the bulbs. Yeah, producing bulblets. So, does anybody have any questions about Galanthus?
So if you planted the bulbs, is it like daffodils? You plant them?
Yeah, and these are ones you don't have to remove. You know, some bulbs we do better here to remove and save, but these you can leave them in the ground and they'll do just fine. So, yeah. So this is the next plant we're going to be talking about. Yep, Buddleja cordata. Yes, it is. Oh yeah. No, I mean, you know, there's some diagnostic features to identify it to you as a Buddleja. You know, namely, this tomentose foliage in the stems. You know, you kind of turn it, it's a little bit paler under the leaf, and the new growth, which is to me, it's so characteristic of Buddleja, is this just really pale and just soft, very soft and fuzzy. You know, tomentose. And these are the inflorescences. These are the flowers. You know. Individually, the florets are rather nondescript. You know, they're not really going to wow you with their color like some Buddlejas will. But as you can see, this is quite a large Buddleja compared to what you may be used to. And this is a species from Mexico. Yeah, northern and southern Mexico. And it sets bud in late fall, and then it blooms now. And even when it's in bud, it's still, I mean, you see it's actually still got buds that are still opening. You know, and so it's got quite a long window of bloom. I guess that may be what I'm smelling now, that it's minorly fragrant, but you can see bees and pollinators, they quite adore this. This is a lot of nectaries, a good source of nectar for them at a time when other flowers are not going to be flowering. And you know, if we get a really hard freeze, this is something that will take some damage. It will take some damage, but as you can see, it's held up pretty well. So thus far, it is quite happy. It is quite happy. Now I think this is probably around close to its full size. I don't think it's going to get too much larger than this, but it is quite the largest Buddleja that I've actually seen, and I think it's the largest one that we certainly have in the garden. So yeah, and also it's going to need sun to set flowers. It's like most Buddlejas, you can grow them in shade, but they will be leggy, and you know the flowering will not wow you. It'll be very sporadic if it flowers at all, and so. We have this in an area here in the white garden where it is actually able to get a fair amount of sun, and so that's why it is able to flower in such profusion. So, yeah, like I said, you know, this also has interest beyond the flowers in its foliage, because like most Buddlejas, it actually has kind of attractive foliage, and this one I think is particularly more attractive because it's got a larger leaf, and it still has these lighter colored undersides. So, does anybody have any questions about this Buddleja? So, this is Chimonanthus praecox, which is the epithet meaning early. This is praecox Luteus is the cultivar, and it's these are, I don't know if he's showing, these are the yellow flowers. These are the flowers. They're quite conspicuous and they're fragrant. These have a very pleasant fragrance. And as you see, this is something that flowers and retains its foliage. And it kind of hides the flowers a little bit from you by putting them on the other side of the branches. But nonetheless, the fragrance is really, really quite nice. I encourage all of you, as we walk by, to smell this one as well. It's only hardy to zone 7, so you may not be able to enjoy this further north, but it is certainly worthy of it, if nothing else for the fragrance. But as you see, it is loaded with these buds. It is loaded with flower buds, and it's not even at its peak bloom yet, and so it will continue to open up flowers, and I imagine on a warm day it will also have a diffusion of that fragrance. So, like I said, I encourage all of you to take a smell of this, and this is native to Eastern China. So, now, does anybody? Okay, well, and also I guess I can talk about the form of this a little bit. It's kind of a small tree. This is not going to be. This is like an understory tree. This is not going to be getting very big, and as such, you see, it's actually growing in quite a bit of shade. This is something that's not going to take a lot of sun to flower. So, if you're limited in how much sun you have in your yard, this may be something to worth considering if you want some late blooming fragrance, yellow flowers. And it's quite conspicuous. You know, we have other species that are late blooming that have fragrance, like Hamamelis virginiana, but its flowers are nowhere near as conspicuous as this. You know, it's got those little filaments. So, yeah, does anybody have any questions about this? Yes?
Any fall color, and what about deer?
Yeah, so I don't think this has any fall color. I think this is evergreen. Well, I'm going to hesitate to say that it's evergreen. It does not appear to be changing color yet, so I would not classify it as fall color, because we're getting into the winter, and so I imagine though if we got down bad pretty cold, it may lose its leaves. I seem to remember one year that this did not have any leaves on it. So now deer, like I said, we don't have any deer pressure here, and I didn't see any mention of it when I was doing my research as to whether or not it was deer resistant. So make of that what you may, but it is it's quite woody. It's flowering on woody growth. So, you know, I would say I don't think you would have to be worrying about it getting browsed at this time of year whenever it's flowering. So, does anybody have any other questions about this? So this is actually our last plant. This is Sarcocola ruscifolia, which is named after the genus Ruscus, which is we have right back there. Actually, I believe that's what that is. And so it's named after that. And you can see these flowers. These are actually anthers. So these are staminate flowers. Yeah, these are staminate flowers, and that's what you see protruding off of here. That is the male reproductive organs of this flower, and it is actually fragrant as well. And many species of Sarcococa bloom in the winter, and this is actually kind of early for this. This is supposed to be blooming later into the winter, but it is in not peak bloom right now, but it is certainly picking up. You can see it's still got tons of buds on the ends of these branches, and this is evergreen. This is an evergreen. It's an evergreen kind of shrub, and it's kind of creeped out. It kind of spreads kind of by rhizome, so you could divide this. And Sarcococas you can also propagate through stem cuttings. So keep that in mind. This is native to China, but it's hardy to at least zone 7. I didn't see a specific mention of its hardiness on our site. And these actually get red berries. These turn into red berries whenever they're pollinated and they ripen. The berries are red, like a nice red. So I think that would contrast quite nicely with this fine evergreen foliage kind of lanceolate. So yeah, and this is deer resistant. This one is deer resistant. That was listed about this. This is deer resistant. Yes. You know, people really care about that. And this thrives in part shade. Sarcococas generally prefer part shade. So, does anybody have any questions about the Sarcococa? And yet again, this is one I encourage you to think. Yeah, I encourage all of you to smell this one as well. It is, now I don't know if it's quite as nice as the Chimonanthus, but it is still nice. It still has a nice fragrance.
And the bees like it.
Yeah. The bees do like it. You know, our weather right now is going to be kind of keeping a lot of flying insects from doing too much. So. Yeah. I think I mentioned that earlier, but I don't know if you caught that. So yeah, it does. It actually was planted. It was obviously planted. It was further underneath this mahogany, and over time it has crept outwards. You know, and so it's kind of spread around.
But very slow.
Yeah, yeah. Now this is not something that's going to take over your yard.
It's not a thug.
No. But you could, like, if you ever want to move it around, you can also divide it. You know, you could also just divide it. So
Very good.
we'll take advantage of that. All right. Yep. So it's my pleasure.
You did well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.